means to be really human, about our identity and value, we're going to start with a short drama from our drama team that actually raises the question of the identity of another human being, a human being that we'll be thinking about a number of times throughout this week, the figure of Jesus Christ. So, without further ado, put your hands together and welcome our drama team.
From now on, you do know him, and have seen him.
We're thinking tonight about the question of what it means to be truly human. What is it that makes us truly human? There was a story of a couple of drunk guys who came out of the pub late one night, and as they were stumbling down the road, they realised they didn't know where they were. And so they were looking around for someone to ask for directions. They came across a very smart, uniformed naval officer. And they rocked up to this guy, a bit drunk, and said, "Hey mate, do you know where we are?" And the naval officer was obviously quite offended at the way that they were treating him. And so he straightened up his back, looked down his nose at them and said, "Do you know who I am?" And then one of the drunk guys said to his mate, "Now we're really in trouble. We don't know where we are, and he don't know who he is." But the question we're thinking about tonight is, who are we? What does it mean to be human? Where is it that we get our value, our identity from? All of us would feel that there is something intrinsically valuable about human beings, but where do we get that identity? Is it something we create for ourselves? I mean, most adverts on TV are all about creating an identity, creating a sense of importance through what you own, what you wear, what you listen to, all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, even down to things like, I remember, for instance, when I was a teenager and iPods were kind of just coming in. It was really cool to have an iPod because it obviously said something quite, about your kind of taste in technological devices. And so, the police, though, were warning people when iPods just first came out, so that obviously it was quite dangerous to walk around with white headphones because it was like a big advert saying, "I own an iPod." And so the police said, if you own an iPod, don't wear white headphones, wear black headphones, and then people won't know you've got an iPod, and they won't mug you.
Did it make any difference? No. Because actually more important than owning an iPod is actually letting everyone else know that you own an iPod. And so that's why people wore the white headphones. In fact, I discovered that you could do something quite clever here. I didn't own an iPod because I didn't have much money. I just bought the headphones. And then I walked around and everyone thought I had one. But you know, the idea of kind of we create image, we create significance with what we have. I mean, I remember when I passed my driving test, I was so excited because I could now drive. And I got on the insurance on my parents' brown Volvo estate. And I thought, now I have a car, everyone will love me. I hadn't thought about what kind of car I was driving. I just thought it had wheels. It went. And so I called up the girl in my class at school who I particularly quite liked. And I phoned her up and I said, I can give you a lift to school tomorrow if you want and pass my driving test. And she said, oh, okay. So I thought, score. I get to give the girl a lift to school. The only thing was, when I got to her house, she came out, she took one look at the car, and you could see by her face she was rather appalled. And as we got close to the school, she actually said to me, no joke, she said, can you drop me off a few streets away so I can walk the rest? Because she obviously didn't want to be seen dead coming in my car. Or maybe it was just me, I don't know. I didn't try it with a different car. But the idea, we've got to create value or create significance. But what is it that really makes us significant? Or what is it that really makes us valuable as human beings? I mean, people talk about human rights, but why do humans have rights? You know, we complain, don't we, if we get treated like animals, but what makes us different to an animal? What actually makes us valuable? Someone actually worked out how valuable you are. Do you know how they did it? What they did is they got all the composite parts of your body and they worked out how much you have, the chemicals in your body, in the average human body, I should hasten to add. And then they worked out how much it would cost to sell to a chemist. And do you know how much you're worth to a chemist? Apparently, with inflation, I tried to work this out, it was done a few years ago, you're worth about £6.60, which is a bit disappointing, isn't it? I mean, I was personally hoping for slightly more than £6.60. What are you worth? What am I worth? They worked out how much are you worth. They said that you're worth this, £6.60, and in your body, apparently, there is enough iron to make a 6-inch nail, okay? Very useful. Enough sulfur to cure the average dog of fleas. Enough carbon to make 900 pencils. Enough potassium to fire a toy cannon. Enough fat. Now this one really is a case of, you know, the average human body, I have to hasten to add. I guess some of us may be above or below it. But enough fat in the average human body to make 7 bars of soap. Enough phosphorus to tip the end of 2,200 matches, and enough water to fill a 10-gallon tank. And that is apparently what you're worth. Now we kind of laugh, don't we? Because we kind of all say, well, of course we're worth more than that. Of course that's not all I'm worth. But actually, the question is, why? See, if there is no God, if this is just a materialistic world in which, you know, we are chemical reactions and nothing more, why should we be worth anything more than that? In fact, there are quite a few people, philosophical materialists, who've said things like that. You won't be able to see them, but I can read them. Here's what Francis Crick said. He said, your joys, sorrows, memories, and ambitions, sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells. Who you are is nothing but a load of neurons. Now that might be a bit discouraging. I'm not sure what Francis Crick puts in his Valentine's cards. To my wonderful bunch of neurons. Doesn't go down too well. But actually he's being quite consistent. He's saying, look, that's all I think there is in life. Just, you know, chemical reactions and nothing more. Or Friedrich Nietzsche said this. He said, man is a disease on the face of the earth. Francis Bacon, the artist, said, man now realizes he's an accident, a completely futile being that has to play out the game without reason. Or Sartre, the existential philosopher, he said, man is a crumpled piece of paper in the rain whose only liberation is death. So actually, there are a lot of people who are willing to say, that is all we are. That's all the significance that we have in life. But actually, I want to say, and perhaps you'd want to say, that deep down, we feel that we're more than that. Deep down, we actually feel that we have a value and a significance that's way beyond that. And actually, the irony is, even people like Sartre and people like Bertrand Russell, atheist philosophers who spent most of their life trying to say that life had no value or purpose or stuff like that, came to the realization that actually the center of me is always and eternally a terrible pain, a searching for something beyond what the world contains. And Jean-Paul Sartre said, "I do not see myself so much as dust that has appeared in the world, but as a being that was expected, a being that could, it seems, come only from a creator. And this recognition of a created hand drives me back to God." See, here's the point. Philosophically, we might come to the conclusion that, yes, I'm just a bunch of chemicals. I'm just a load of neurons, as Francis Crick says. But in terms of our life and our experience of life, we don't live that way, do we? No one does, and no one can. Because deep down, we feel that we do have an intrinsic value. And the question is, if philosophically materialism doesn't give us a basis for it, where does it come from? What is the reason for it? And actually, that's where turning to the Christian worldview is really significant. Because actually, right at the heart of the Christian message is this, that people are not just a bunch of neurons. Actually, the Bible, right at the beginning of the Bible, it affirms this about humanity. It says that human beings were created in God's image. Now, that doesn't mean that God physically looks like us. God isn't a physical being, and maybe he'd be better looking than me anyway, even if he was a physical being. What does it mean to say that human beings are created in God's image? It says that something of God's character, something of what God is like, is reflected in me and in you. So God is creative and we are creative. God is artistic. God is intelligent. God is logical. God is moral. All of these things. And God gives us as human beings this unique value and dignity. It doesn't come simply because we're slightly more evolved or because we have a slightly greater function than other animals, but because of intrinsically who we are. That's what the Christian worldview says. But more than that, the Christian worldview says that human beings are important, not simply because we're created in God's image, but right at the center of the Christian message, this claim that God became part of the human race. In our drama at the beginning, we raised the question of who is Jesus? And of course, all sorts of people have different interpretations. But the surprising, perhaps, conviction of the first century followers of Jesus, surprising because it went against all expectations of what they were likely to believe, is this, that Jesus wasn't just a good teacher or a moral person, but he was God. That the God of the universe had stepped into humanity and had taken on humanity and had become one of us. The Christian conviction is that the God of the universe has become a human being. He's joined our race. And if there's anything that gives our race as human beings value and dignity, it's because God is part of it. It's an absolutely incredible claim to make. Now, what difference does that make? Can I say it makes a really huge difference? You see, actually, it's this conviction of the value of human beings that the Bible gives that's led Christians through history to do all sorts of things, like abolish slavery and protest against racism and end child labor and set up hospitals. This conviction that human beings have value and dignity that says everyone is valuable, no matter how old or how young, no matter how rich or how poor, no matter how able or disabled, no matter how mentally, intelligent they are, or how many difficulties they might have. Whoever they are, they have value because they're created in God's image. Which actually also means this: if this story of the world is true, then you have value as well because you're created in God's image. Your value doesn't simply come from your achievements or your results or what other people think of you. You have an intrinsic value that won't change. I don't think any other philosophy gives as good a basis for the value of humanity than that. But actually, there's also a bit of a question mark here, isn't there? Because we've just affirmed that humanity is valuable and significant. And sometimes we see that, but sometimes we don't. Actually, sometimes when we look at humanity and what humanity has been capable of, we're appalled by it, aren't we? Actually, perhaps, if we're going to be really honest, if we look not just at humanity, but we look at ourselves and we see what we are capable of, we can be appalled ourselves at the kind of things that we might do or not do. And so how do we kind of reconcile this idea that human beings have value because they're created by God, and yet human beings can do such stupid things that we can seem so messed up? A few years ago, I was flying into London and I flew over Windsor Castle. Took that picture from, actually maybe I didn't take quite that picture, but it was pretty much like that from the plane. Maybe it was a little bit higher. And I was thinking, Windsor Castle, beautiful castle, you know, one of the Queen's kind of official residences in London. But a few years before, if you had gone to that incredible castle and you'd gone inside it, this is what you'd have seen inside. Absolute carnage. Now imagine if you went into that castle and you said, gosh, I don't think much of the designers of Windsor Castle. The architect was rubbish. You know, well, you might be forgiven for thinking that, apart from the fact that quite obviously something has gone catastrophically wrong. There was a terrible fire. And a building that was beautiful and ornate had been almost destroyed by that fire. It was a ruin. A glorious ruin, because from the outside, it still looked wonderful, but on the inside, everything had been wrecked.
Last year, as I was speaking, I actually blew up 2 PA systems, so maybe that would be 3. But let's just keep on going. I think you can hear me nonetheless. If you were to go in, you would say, look, this thing has been damaged. Something has gone wrong. There's a catastrophic event that's taken place, and it's been wrecked. And actually what the Bible says is that humanity is a bit like that. One Christian philosopher put it this way. They said, humanity is a glorious ruin. We have value, we're glorious, we have significance because God created us, and yet something has gone catastrophically wrong. That humanity in general, and actually each of us in particular, have cast ourselves off from God, have lived in independence from Him, and have made a mess. Not just of the world around us, not just of other people. Sometimes we do that, don't we? But of ourselves. We don't always live the way we should, do what we should. And sometimes we do the things we shouldn't. And yes, we still have this value. We're not, completely destroyed like the image of that castle, and yet something has gone wrong. And so the question is this. If we are significant but broken, or to use the Bible's word, sinful, messed up on the inside, do we still have value to God or not? Do we still have value? Let me try and illustrate it. In my pocket, I have a £20 note, okay? Now, it is my intention this evening to give this away to somebody, okay? You might think that there's some little trick going to go on. So I'm going to just come down and check, or get someone else to check that this is in fact a genuine £20 note. So can you just tell me, so if that is £20? It looks £20. Do you want to just check it as well?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so it's a real £20 note. So I'm not going to fob you off by giving you a fake, okay?
We got this from the post office this afternoon. Now, I would like to give it to someone tonight. My question is simply, who would like it? Okay, so if you would like it, I'd like you to put your hand up, okay? I'm only going to give it to someone who puts their hand up. No strings attached, okay? Okay, some of you obviously think this is a trick. You don't really believe me, but most of you do. Okay, hands down, hands down. So I want to give this out, but first, it's nice and crisp and clean, this £20 notes, as I say, out the post office this afternoon. But a few things I've always liked to do to a £20 note. One of the things, have you ever done this to money? Has anyone ever done it? Just screwed it up. Because it is, at the end of the day, just paper, isn't it? So you can screw it up into a little ball. It's very satisfying. And of course, no one will want it now. Who would like it now? Gosh, you still want it. Well, this is amazing, okay? Well, of course, I could also, drop it on the floor. and I could, tread on it and wipe it into the dirt up at the front here. This is probably illegal, by the way. Probably can't do that to the Queen's face. Apologise to her later. So just kind of wipe it in the dirt. There's always a bit of dirt there. Who would like it now? She said, wow. Now, again, I've always wanted to do this. Oh, sharp intakes of breath over there. It's wonderful. It's just paper, isn't it? I mean, this is painful for some people. I know. Yeah, there you go. Who would like it now? Because she still wants it. Wow. But it's torn and it's dirty and it's... last week I was away visiting some friends and some of them had colds and I picked up a bit of a cold last week. And so I've been sneezing quite a lot recently and... And it's just lucky because I didn't bring any tissues tonight, but I did have this in my back pocket. And I thought that would be great. Who would like it now? Because some of you still want it. This is very impressive, okay? Now, I didn't get time for lunch today, and so I'm still a little bit peckish. And I was thinking, how much nutritional value do you think is on a £20 note? Have you ever wondered? Well, let's give it a go, shall we? No, okay. I do have limits. But seriously, who would like the £20 note? Anyone wants it? Hands up, hands up. Who you want it at the back there, sir? You can have it. There you go. It's yours.
Oh, awesome.
There you go. Great. Well, round of applause to you. You looked in shock as if I wasn't actually going to get... You might want to wash your hands later after touching it. But it's strange, isn't it? There you go, £20. It was torn, it was dirty, it was screwed up, and yet it was still valuable, wasn't it? Some of you, still wanted it. And the question is, if we are a little bit like that £20 note, sometimes dirty, sometimes messed up, torn up, and broken, are we still valuable to the God of the universe? And the incredible thing that we discover is this, that we are. There's a story that we read about in Luke's account of Jesus' life. And it's found in chapter 7 if you want to read it later. Jesus goes to a dinner party at this group of religious leaders' house. And they're all kind of reclining at the table. It's very posh company. In fact, Jesus hung out not so much in the posh company, but in quite different company. But on this occasion, he was in posh company. And then in the middle of this dinner, and this woman walks in. And everyone knows who she is. Everyone in that town, at least. Because her past went before her, as it were. People knew what she had done. They knew about her lifestyle. They knew about the mistakes that she had made. They knew, well, in their language, they called her a sinner. And she walked into this dinner party. She gate-crashed it, really. She wasn't invited. She wasn't meant to be there. And she walks in, and then she walks up to Jesus, and she starts crying and weeping and wetting his feet with her tears and then washing his feet. And all the people in the party are looking on. Now, how do you think people would respond in that situation? Well, I'll tell you how they responded. The religious leaders, they responded by kind of, well, you can imagine at very least, them kind of shuffling their chairs back a little bit. Just moving away from her. And looking down their noses. And they said, surely Jesus should know who this woman is and what she's done. You see, by their nature, by the way they spoke about her even, just this woman, they showed their utter contempt and their condemnation of her. And sometimes religion can be a bit like that, can't it? Religion, we feel, just is designed to make us feel worse about ourselves. And maybe sometimes in the company of religious people, sadly maybe even in the company of church people, you've felt that kind of rejection, that judgmentalism. But how does Jesus respond to her? It's so amazing. Jesus doesn't condemn her. But nor does he condone her. He doesn't say that everything she's done is really okay, because it wasn't. He doesn't condemn her, and he doesn't condone her, but he forgives her. He accepts her. He treats her with dignity and gives her a fresh start. And actually, what we see is that Jesus does that again and again, not just for people back then, but he does that for people today. He knows all about us, and yet he still loves us. You know, it's great to be loved, isn't it? But to be loved and not really known is a bit shallow. And to be known and not really loved, well, that's pretty scary. But what if there was someone who could know you intimately, all of your failures and mistakes, the ones that you don't even admit to your best friends? What if someone knew you completely and still loved you? That's exactly how Jesus treated that woman. That's exactly how he treats us. He says, you have real value. Not because you're worth it, because I'm going to treat you in that way. Not because you kind of intrinsically, I just think, oh, you're so lovely. Because actually there's lots in my life that isn't lovely. But he says, I'm going to love you anyway. And you'll become lovely because I love you. And actually, if you think about value, how do you know how valuable something is? Well, ultimately, it's down to the price you're willing to pay, isn't it? How much are you willing to pay for something or someone? You see, what was it that God was willing to pay for us? Again, we read this, that God was willing to pay, not money for us, but he did something far more significant, and that is he went to a cross. He gave not money, but his life. That Jesus Christ hung and died, taking upon himself the shame and the guilt of the mess of the wrong that we have done in our lives, so that can be wiped clean, so that we can be given a fresh start and things can be transformed. In fact, I showed you that place. If you were to go to Windsor Castle today, if you were to go to that same room, do you know what you would find? This is what you'd find. You'd find an incredibly ornate room. What did they do? They transformed it. They got rid of the rubbish and the dirt, but they didn't just leave it an empty room. They've restored it. Some people say it's even more beautiful than it was before. And that is a little picture of what the God of the universe through Jesus can do in our lives. He's not just wanting to get rid of the rubbish, the stuff that messes up our life, but he wants to come and start to transform it to make it beautiful and to make it into the kind of life that will really reflect his beauty as well.